In this session, we'll receive an overview of early intervention and waiver programs from Serena Denbow, as well as her mentor, Jeanette Laffoon. Serena has been working in the field of Social Security for 20 years. She started off as a legal assistant, then sat for the certification test to become a non-attorney representative in December 2011. Her mentor, Jeanette, is now tutoring her in a law program to prepare her to sit for the bar. She has her AA from Green River Community College and a BA from Evergreen State College. She is also a parent to a 13-year-old daughter with Dravet syndrome.
Good morning. My name is Jeanette Laffoon, and this is Serena Denbow. We work together in a law firm that specializes in Social Security, disability, and SSI law. And we're here today to talk to you about some of the programs that may be available to you as a Dravet patient or to your children as Dravet parents. This is being recorded. We're not live right now, but I will be available live to answer questions as you're viewing this. There are also some materials that you can download that we'll refer to throughout the program. So I'm Jeanette. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney since 1987. I've been doing Social Security disability work since 1995.
And my name is Serena Denbow. I have been working with Jeanette Laffoon for over 20 years now. And over the last 8 years, I've been able to work in the capacity as a non-attorney representative. Dravet is very dear to me personally because we provided some pictures of Tristan, who is my now 13-year-old. These are some older pictures, but she has Dravet syndrome. And so that's why we've gotten involved. Jeanette, talk to us about the overview here.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of the Social Security programs that may be available to you. And then Serena will get more into the guts of it and talk about the seizure disorder listings and how Dravet is treated by the Social Security Administration. So there are basically 4 Social Security programs that you may qualify for. Each one has its kind of weird things about it. So you'll want to probably talk to Social Security and find out if any of these might apply. They're a friendly lot. I advise you to call your local Social Security office as opposed to the 800 number that ends with 1234 because they know nothing. So the first program is called Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. This is a federal welfare program. So this is available to kids under the age of 18. It's available for adults over the age of 18, but there's a different set of rules that applies with respect to income and resources. So SSI for kids under the age of 18, let me start over. Okay, so for SSI, you have to be disabled, and then there are also limitations related to income and resources. So if you're over the age of 18, Social Security looks at your income and your resources. You can't have more than $2,000 in stuff that you could turn into money to take care of yourself, and you can only have a limited amount of income, which is very low. The amount depends on whether it's earned income or unearned income.
Jeanette, on that, is it possible that family size is also a factor in that? Do you mind talking to that?
Yes. Now, as far as family size, that only comes into play for children who are otherwise eligible for SSI. So prior to the age of 18, Social Security looks at the resources and income of the parents, and the amount that you can earn and still have your child eligible for SSI is very, very low. There are certain exclusions. It depends on the size of your family. It depends on the source of the income, whether it's earned income or unearned income. But SSI can be very tricky for normal families where you earn a normal living. Again, those complications go away once the child reaches the age of 18. And if we have time at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about the income and resources and the exclusions. But there are 3 other programs that may come into play for people who have worked Dravet patients who have worked and had income and paid income taxes, you may qualify for Social Security disability. You have, the first test is whether or not you're earning what they call substantial gainful activity. This year, that amount I think is $1,310. Next year it will be $1,350. So if you're earning less than that, you will qualify at step 1. Then you have to establish you're disabled, and Serena will talk about that. Dravet is actually a compassionate allowance, so that's a pretty easy thing to do. You also have to be insured for Social Security disability benefits. That means that if you look back from the time that you're applying, the time you become disabled and can't work anymore, you have worked and paid taxes for 20 of the last 40 quarters, so basically 5 of the last 10 years. With young adults, however, under the age of 31, they just look back and you have to have worked and paid taxes for half the quarters since age 21. So it's a slightly different approach for young adults who are applying. There are 2 other programs I want to touch on briefly. One is Disabled Child's Benefits, and the other is Dependent Benefits. These 2 programs are available if one of your parents is either retired on Social Security retirement, disabled Social Security disability, or deceased. And those programs don't have income or resources requirements. They're based on you, the child, being dependent upon that parent. So Disabled Child's Benefits are for children over the age of 18. The dependent benefits are for children younger than 18 years old. So those are a couple of other, in some circumstances, that may be available to you. So Serena,
Yes.
talk to us about Dravet and what that means to Social Security.
All right, thank you, Jeanette. So as Jeanette alluded to, Dravet syndrome is part of what they call a compassionate allowance. And this is a specific list of conditions that an individual diagnosed with these conditions may qualify automatically on the disability portion of that. Again, there's still the income requirements that need to be met that Jeanette talked to, and hopefully we have enough time at the end. She can go into that in a little bit more detail. Of course, you can also ask specific questions, and we might be able to help you out in real time as well. Or Jeanette will. I will be on a plane. So as I explained, Dravet syndrome is part of a compassionate allowance that is under the program that is part of the operations manual Social Security uses, called the POMS. And the number is DI 23022.943. And that again is specific for Dravet syndrome. There's some other conditions or diagnoses that this condition may go under, or alternate names, such as severe myoclonic epilepsy in or of infancy, SME syndrome, epilepsy with polymorphic seizures, and then polymorphic epilepsy in infancy, or PMEI. These are some of the other names. Now, we recognize as we go through the journey of Dravet that the clinical diagnoses have shifted a little bit. From when we first got involved with Dravet syndrome about 12 and a half years ago, on that part of our journey, it was a genetic test. So genetic test is, I would say, the gold standard, specific for the SCN1A gene, showing that there's a mutation of some sort. Again, recognizing there's been some clinical shifting, if you will, clinical findings that are now consistent with Dravet that doctors are using as well. If you have a genetic test, however, use this as part of the process. In addition to the compassion allowance, well, to come back to that real quick, there are other ways that you can help under the clinical findings to determine whether or not, or doctors can determine whether or not Dravet syndrome is the actual diagnosis or one of these alternative names. And some of those include EEGs. We also recognize EEGs aren't 100% foolproof. PET scans, CT scans, lab work, And also, again, clinical history on doctor's examinations. We've provided a link, or not a link, but one of the attachments that talks specifically to the compassionate allowance, as well as some other information that's helpful in helping to prove disability through Social Security. Some of the things that are helpful either for Dravet syndrome specifically, or if you don't have that diagnosis and maybe aren't quite on that firm footing, and your neurologist is saying more epilepsy as opposed to Dravet syndrome. There's also a listing that can be used that Social Security qualifies disability for under epilepsy.
And just to clarify a little bit, because of the compassionate allowance, if you have a diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, that's all you need. You just need the diagnosis.
Yes.
The epilepsy itself is not a compassionate allowance, so you have to prove more stuff.
Yes, but this is why I have her. Thanks, Jeanette. Yes, and I apologize. Yes, the compassionate allowance is something that you, when you apply for Social Security benefits, for disability benefits, you let them know right on the very get-go, when you call to schedule an appointment, when you, if you have the ability to file online. Right now, SSI cannot be filed online, although perhaps in your area, that may be something that is starting to be implemented in your area. But for SSI, you call Social Security, you schedule an appointment. When you schedule that appointment, let them know that you're applying for an individual whose condition is on the compassionate allowance list. And hopefully they'll flag that. And what I plan to do is also help you identify some of the things that will be helpful for you in helping to prove or support the condition. So again, the genetic testing. I also find letters from neurologists to be very helpful. And this is something that I use both for, well, I was going to say for the compassionate allowance list. We did for my daughter, but also for the epilepsy condition diagnosis as well. A letter from the neurologist is very helpful.
Medical source statement too, of course, which
Yes.
identifies the diagnosis. And in the materials, we provided you with a sample form that your neurologist could fill out for Social Security, and that will provide the diagnosis that they need.
Yes. And also for people who are still in school, IEPs, 504 plans, there's also a teacher questionnaire that we've provided. And this is information that when you give that to the teacher, whether it be the special education teacher or if it's a teacher that's kind of a pullout, if you give it to, if you have a child who's in general education but has pullout services, this would be something I would give to both the general education teacher as well as at least one of the pullout teachers if there's special therapies that they're getting pulled out for in school. And when you talk to the teacher about completing this form, I can't say this enough. Make sure that they're completing it with the intent of your child compared to neurotypical children, not other children who may be in a special education class with them, who, yeah, in comparison to these children, yes, they're doing great or they're doing just about average. This is for neurotypical, and this is very helpful for if you have to go through the process of applying under the epilepsy listing. You may not have to go this path if you are able to get them on the compassionate allowance list. Now, the epilepsy diagnoses differ from adults and children. So for children, this part is very similar. If you have a child who has generalized tonic-clonic seizures that occur at least once a month for at least 3 consecutive months, despite ongoing treatment, that's one way. Again, under the epilepsy listing for children, that listing number is 111.02. The other way that a child could get on disability is if they have dyscogenic seizures, dyscognitive seizures or absence seizures. And if this occurs at least weekly for 3 consecutive months, despite ongoing regular medical treatment. Now, that is also true for adults. However, with adults, there's other ways that you can also get disability. And that's if the seizures were occurring, the generalized tonic-clonic seizures occurring at least every 2 months over a 4-month consecutive period, again, with ongoing treatment. And if they have other limitations in the areas of physical functioning, understanding, remembering, or applying information, interacting with other people, in their ability to concentrate, persist, or pace, or adapting or managing to their own special oneself. The dyscognitive seizures, again, those ones, same other limitations in those areas, but those ones, if the dyscognitive seizures are occurring, that would be once every 2 weeks for at least 3 consecutive months, again, with ongoing treatment.
So it can get a little bit complicated and detailed.
Yes.
That's Social Security, that's our world. But the basic message to you is to keep track of the seizures. Keep a diary or a calendar, identify what you see in the seizure so that they can classify it properly, how long it lasts, the post-ictal period, how long that lasts. And you're probably keeping a diary anyway for the doctor, for the neurologist. So just Social Security is interested in that as well.
Yes.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how to get into the program? How do they apply?
Yeah, so there's a process that Social Security, when you go through the local office, again, you give them a call, let them know, hey, I've got a child or an individual, I'm applying for disability benefits. There are conditions on the compassionate allowance list. You can do a Google search to find your local office number. And again, avoid the toll-free number that ends in 1213. You don't want to do that. They won't be able to help you. But if you file at your local Social Security office, provide the information, some of which we covered today. So the listing questionnaire, if you get that completed by your neurologist, a letter from your neurologist, teacher questionnaires, and again, the genetic testing. If you don't have the medical records in hand, that's okay. Social Security is going to get that for you. What you should do, though, is be prepared to provide them all the information of the medical providers you've been seeing, including the primary care doctor. They're not seeing them specifically for epilepsy, perhaps, or Dravet syndrome, but you're going to want to provide all medical information. Doctor's information, specialists for therapies, OT, speech therapy, physical therapy, whatever therapies they're getting. Also the hospitalizations or emergency room visits, if that applies. So names, addresses, phone numbers, and approximate dates of services. You don't have to have every single date, but if you have, oh yeah, we've been going to them since August of last year. Okay, great, that works. Social Security will have take all the information they need. Again, when you talk or are interviewed for the information, you're going to want to again reiterate compassionate allowance list if they have the Dravet syndrome diagnosis. Then from there, they will pull all the records they need. They'll do an analysis, and hopefully they'll be able to just get you approved right away. Because again, we're just talking about the compassionate allowance. If, however, something goes awry, which it always inevitably does, potentially you'll get a denial. If that happens, then you can file an appeal, but that's due in 60 days of the denial date or the date of the denial on the letter. At this point, I think I would recommend looking towards hiring somebody in your local area to help you with the appeals process. Again, Social Security, and I don't do it justice. I think I've only been doing it 20 years and it's still confusing at times trying to explain it to someone else. But it's important that you be able to work with somebody that you trust, that knows the system, knows the process, and can help get the appeal hopefully pushed through at the reconsideration level. Now, most representatives are under the guidance for Social Security anyway, of the contingent fee agreement. And so a representative or attorney will be allowed to charge 25% of any retroactive benefits up to a cap of $6,000. Now, if for some reason the you get denied at the reconsideration level, don't worry, there are other levels of the appeals process, but that's where working with a representative will be helpful, because they'll be able to advise you on the next steps and why this is so important to keep pursuing. So Jeanette, I think we have a little bit more time. Do you mind talking about income restrictions and deeming?
Sure. Okay, so with the SSI program, for children under the age of 18, it's a great program. It gives them Medicaid. It gives them, I think, $794 a month, but they'll apply ISM. And the only problem with SSI is they're going to deem the parent's income and resources to the child. That happens until the child reaches the age of 18. That could disqualify the child from getting SSI for income or resources reasons. What Social Security does is they take a look at the parent's income and they take out allocations for other non-disabled children in the household, which this year is $397 per month per child. They take out the living allowance for the parents. If it's one parent, it's $794. If it's a couple, it's $1,191. So they deduct that from the income. Then they make a calculation. The first $85 isn't counted, and then they divide that by 2, and that's the amount of money that is deemed to the disabled child. If that amount is more than the SSI benefit rate, which this year is $794 a month, the child will not qualify. Also, if the parents have stuff, retirement, money in the bank, stocks, bonds, anything that could be used to help support the child, and that is in excess of $2,000, the child will not qualify because of resources. And again, that happens up until the age of 18. There are, however, some income and resources deeming waivers in some states. The Social Security, as Serena was talking about the POMS, there's a POMS that talks about the deeming waivers. If the child is disabled and the child received 1 or more months of SSI while hospitalized and is eligible for Medicaid under a state home care plan, they will waive the parent's income and resources as far as deeming it to the child. So it's complicated. But if your child has been hospitalized and qualified for SSI while they were in the hospital outside of your home, that is something that you may want to look into. I know there was a session, I think last weekend, Jeff Goring did one on special needs trusts, financial planning. And I know that was more geared towards adults, but you may want to go back and revisit that. If you have and this especially comes into play, if you have a child who's now an adult, but you're supporting the child, you may want to talk to a financial planner about how to set it up so that that child will still qualify for SSI because of under the income and resources rules. Again, it's complicated. Talk to your local district office, your social security office. Do not call that 800 number. They will just give you misinformation. But it's worth looking into. So that kind of concludes what we had for you today. If you have any questions, I hopefully be able to figure out the technology enough to answer your questions online while you're watching this. And we are here as a resource for you. So if you have any specific questions, if you want to talk out your specific scenario, it doesn't matter where in the country you are. We're in Washington State, but we would be happy to give you general information and kind of bat it around and answer any questions you've got. So feel free to give us a call. Our number is on one of the handouts, but let me give it to you. It's 360-786-8276. And either Serena or I would be happy to talk to you.
Yes.
Thanks.
So thanks again to Marianne, to the Dravet Syndrome Foundation for putting on these conferences. They're so important to a lot of us as parents, and it's fun to be able to try and share some of the information that I've been able to use in my day-to-day life for the last 20 years. So thank you, Jeanette, for joining me today and providing all the information that I missed. But again, thanks so much, and have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for that informative presentation, Jeanette, and thank you for all of these handouts. I know our families are going to find all of this information really useful. We're sorry that Serena couldn't join us today because of another commitment, but we appreciate that you joined us for questions. We did have some questions that came in before the session, and I think you may have answered them in part during the session, but I think it would also be helpful if I could ask them directly so that the families that submitted them have a succinct response. The first one that came in was, we were told our child doesn't qualify for SSI because of our income. Shouldn't that decision be based solely on his disability?
Well, no, unfortunately with SSI, it's a needs-based program. Think of it as federal welfare. So the parent's income and resources are deemed to the child. Now, not all of them are. So it's important to have them take a look at the actual numbers. In some cases, your income or resources may not be high enough to completely preclude the SSI.
This next one is somewhat similar and kind of, I think, goes back to that idea of the compassionate allowances list, but they were asking, I thought that Dravet syndrome was an automatically qualifying disorder for SSI, but my 7-year-old son was denied. Shouldn't he qualify based on his diagnosis? Is there any reason why he would be denied?
So the compassionate allowance is an automatic finding of disability. The different programs, though, have different income and resources requirements. So there isn't going to be any question of disability under the compassionate allowance, but probably what it was the income and resources issues with SSI. Now, with kids under the age of 18, the parents' income and resources are going to be deemed to them, except under very rare circumstances. So if your child has been institutionalized for more than a month, it's possible that there's a state waiver available for the income and resources. That's a state-by-state issue, but keep that in mind. If your child ever has to be hospitalized for more than a month, that might be a way to go. Also, if one of the parents is disabled or retired, receiving Social Security benefits, or deceased, it's possible that the child will qualify for benefits under what we call the Title II program. In that program, income and resources are not relevant to eligibility for benefits.
Great. And then the last question I had was, I feel completely overwhelmed by starting this process. Is there a way to find someone near me who can help get those benefits? And also, how do I vet them and make sure that they understand the best way to approach this?
Okay, so it is overwhelming. However, I think you might find that your local Social Security office is more helpful than you believe they will be. It's a little bit difficult now with COVID because those offices are not open. You can't just walk in and talk to somebody, but you might try calling your local office. Now, if you want somebody to help you apply, there are attorneys who specialize in Social Security disability and SSI law. So you might want to give one of them a call. I'm going to give you a number, 845-682-1881. And that is an organization we call NOSCR. It's the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives. It's a national organization, and they can put you in touch with an attorney who specializes in that area of law in your area. I'd highly recommend that you get somebody local. There are a number of national law firms that kind of do this, but I've heard that it's difficult to talk to your actual attorney in those firms. You end up being shuffled down to a clerk, and then, you know, maybe you talk to your attorney before the hearing. But if you contact NOSCR, and you can also reach them at noscr.org. So that's NOSSCR.org. And they can put you in touch with a really good representative who has been vetted.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. And if we have any other questions come in, we'll certainly reach out, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to our next session.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.